This is the X Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome to the X Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell, and for the next 4 hours, I'm your host and your guide as together we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And the X Zone comes to you Monday through Friday from 8 p.m. Eastern until midnight, right here on the X Zone Broadcast Network and on the Starcom Radio Network. Worldwide toll-free, 800-610-7035. Our email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, X Zone Radio TV. And you can listen to the X Zone 724-365 at www.xzoneradiotv.com. My first guest tonight is a good friend of the X Zone. Kevin Randle is with us. And first of all, Kevin, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. It's nice to speak to someone who is grounded.
Does that mean I don't get to fly anymore?
You can fly all you want, my friend. You are a true pilot. However, I've got to tell you about a couple of the guests we've had over the past 2 weeks here. One guest told me that Martian cannibals that are 7 to 8 feet tall are responsible for all the missing people here on Earth.
Okay.
All right. Another guest told me that 300,000 people have been sucked out of underground bases by the aliens, and that 380,000 Russian troops landed in Denver, Colorado in 2013.
Coincidentally, I was just in Denver this last weekend.
Uh-huh.
And I saw no Russians.
Yeah. Well, when I called up the newspaper in Denver, they said, "What?" Okay, now here's another one. Last night I was speaking to a lady who told me that she had met with someone by the name of Thor from the planet Venus who knew Ed Adamski.
No. Isn't the surface temperature of Venus like 800 degrees Fahrenheit and would melt lead?
Yeah, well, it gets stranger, my friend. It gets stranger.
Okay.
Are you holding on to your chair for this one, bud?
Yes.
Okay, now what she said that she had also had experienced was the ghost of Nikola Tesla comes and talks to her because she sees formulas floating in the air. And she has actually, with the help of Nikola Tesla, developed an energy orb that is about 3 inches in diameter. It looks like an old glass paperweight from what I understand. And she has devised the perfect formulation of plasma by introducing the right amount of hydrogen and oxygen into water. I know what you're going to say, but give me a second here. She has sold these all over the world at $450 US a pop, and she is doing this from her home on, I would imagine, the kitchen table with her daughter.
Well, actually, I have the formula for those orbs, and I would happily sell them for $398.
Well, there you go. Well, I'm going to promote it, and we'll go on a little bit of a barter system over here. How's that?
But I do have a question for you.
Sure.
if they are Martians
Yes. No.
and they're eating humans,
Yes.
they wouldn't be cannibals unless they were eating other Martians, would they?
Well, I didn't want to get into that with her because I thought she was out to lunch as it was, and I expected her to either have an aneurysm or run and ask me to take time out so she could get her meds.
Okay.
And then I said to her, I said, well, how do you do it? She says, well, we do everything in our house. And I said, does your fire department know that you're playing with hydrogen and making plasma in your house? No, I don't think they do. No kidding. So I said, well, how many of these have you sold? And she said, I don't know. I said, well, wait a minute. You just told me that you sell them around the world. And you can't give me a figure? No, I can't. Well, what are your costs? Well, I can't tell you that. Why not? I don't know. So it seems that, and I guess what I'm getting at here is that as we continue our quest to try and get to the bottom of the barrel to find out what the truth is about UFOs, extraterrestrials, you know what? They're still out there. And I'm not talking about the extraterrestrials at this point. I'm talking about the different people who are reporting that they are seeing and meeting with 7 to 8 foot tall cannibals from Mars. And Kevin, how do you maintain your sanity? Because you've been at this a long time.
I ignore those people as much as I can. I don't think there's many people that buy into that nonsense, and I just don't have to deal with them. And I think your questions were apropos or pertinent to the woman. How much does it cost you to make one of these things? Well, you ought to know that.
Yeah.
How many have you sold? Well, I can't tell you the exact number today, but, in the last 3 weeks we sold X number or X zone number.
Well, you know what? We did some calculations here today. And we found that a glass orb that you can actually put a liquid into costs 32 cents. And that's a 3-inch orb. Okay.
And that would be and there would be hydrogen and water, oxygen that you put into this orb, which was basically water.
Exactly. And it didn't dawn on her that I said, well, water is H2O. She said, that's right. And what I do is I add hydrogen and oxygen to the water.
So you've got H3O2?
Basically. Okay, so, we've got that end of the scale of, and she's been at this for 20 years, by the way. And the other lady who was talking about the Martians that are coming to Earth and eating the people, she's been at this for a number of years. In fact, the lady who I had on last night who met with George Adamski had to have been at this longer than 20 years.
Well, there was this guy that claimed, and I forget his name, who claims that he was abducted from his bed at 17, put into some kind of star service by the aliens, and served on Mars. Couldn't he have defeated the Martian cannibals?
You would think so. You would definitely think so. But anyway, then she was saying that, I said to her, I said, well, if this is an energy source that could solve all the problems of Earth, has anybody tried to buy it from you? Oh, she said, oh, yes, a company tried to give her $10 million for it, but she didn't want to sell it.
I would have.
Oh, sure, so would I.
And a royalty, 10% royalty. We're done.
And then she said, I want to keep it. I want to keep everything to myself. I said, well, what would happen if a group of people from China bought 1,000 of them and figured out how to do what you're doing and mass market it? Well, they can't do that. Why not? They don't have the technology. Well, if they bought 1,000 of them, they could easily find out what the technology is. Like, wow, it won't take them very long to figure that the liquid inside of the orb is hydrogen and oxygen. No, they can't. So then it went on a little further where I basically said, well, listen, if you want to keep it so that you can help the world and help with the energy crisis, because apparently this orb can fuel your car, can fuel your home, it can do everything because Nikola Tesla told her how to do it. His ghost did, while she was in bed one time alone. I said, so why are you selling them for $450 if you want to give, if you want to help the world? No answer. No answer.
The problem we have today, unfortunately, is we're all so interconnected with the internet, Facebook, whatever you know. I could host my own radio show from my house on a podcast. We're so interconnected with all of this stuff that we're giving voices to people who 15, 20 years ago you'd have never heard from. They wouldn't have been able to find a forum from which to spew their nonsense. And we run into that more and more all the time. And remember this wonderful commercial where the woman says they can't put anything on the internet that's not true.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one, yeah.
And you're thinking, there's so much stuff on the internet that's not true, and it just gives voices to all the nonsense around there. And I think that we, and when I say we, I'm thinking of people who are interested in UFOs, who have a legitimate interest in UFOs, who understand what's going on. We have an obligation to try to weed this stuff out because we all get tarred with that brush. And I don't know how many times I've run into this, that you've got a good, solid UFO case, and somebody comes up with a nonsensical explanation for it, and they get their form, whatever it is, and people decide that's the explanation. Well, wasn't that explained by X? And you can say, no, it wasn't explained by X. They threw this answer out there, but it doesn't explain the facts. But people get the idea that there was a legitimate answer. And what comes to mind immediately is the Project Mogul nonsense for the Roswell UFO crash. I mean, you don't have to accept it to be alien.
Right.
But the point is, Project Mogul doesn't explain it because Project Mogul, A, wasn't highly classified. The ultimate purpose was what they were doing in New Mexico in July of 1947 was using off-the-shelf weather balloons, off-the-shelf radar targets, and performing experiments through the University of New York University, and so there was nothing classified going on. The equipment wasn't exotic; it wasn't unidentifiable, and yet people say, "Oh, Roswell was explained by Project Mogul because the Air Force said so." Well, no, it wasn't explained by Project Mogul, and that's like the fourth time the Air Force has trotted out some kind of a balloon explanation for Roswell.
Right, but
it's always been it's a balloon, but there's no evidence to back that up.
But are we any closer to getting to the truth that what really did happen at Roswell, New Mexico in July of 1947, if anything?
No, well, obviously something fell.
Yeah.
Everybody agrees on that point, something fell. But the problem is we've moved in reverse. And I think the Roswell slides nonsense of May.
Oh, that was crazy.
That kind of demonstrates it.
Yeah.
I mean, I am still have not been able to get an answer to the question is why did the guy that had the slides decide it was an alien as opposed to what it actually was? What made him make that leap? And, well, obviously it was a financial inducement. He knew exactly what he had. But the point really is, I think that damaged all of the research being done because here is something that got an awful lot of publicity around the world. The big reveal was held in Mexico City. You could stream it live if you wanted to cough up $15 and watch this whole thing unfold. And within 24 hours, 48 hours, we knew what the answer was. Had the guys with the slides been honest, we would have known that 3 years ago. Because there was no way that placard on the slides could be read after 48 hours. With the guys who owned the slides had to be clear enough that they could read the whole thing. So the point is, but that's damaged any research, and people remember that. We dealt with the alien autopsy.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
We've dealt with witnesses who seemed credible at the time, who clearly were not. We've learned that people, and this is what stunned me, is people actually taking their military records and altering them.
Whoa.
And I had not realized how prevalent this was until I read a book called Stolen Valor, and it's about all of these people claiming to be Vietnam veterans who are not. And
well, do you remember Jason Lee, the guy in Cleburne, Texas, who claimed to have been a former U.S. Navy SEAL and a former cameraman for ABC?
There's all kinds of those people.
Well, wait, this guy gets worse. Number one, he was never a U.S. Navy SEAL. Number two, do you remember the guy that strapped dynamite around himself and drove into the Veterans Affairs office in Waco, Texas?
I do remember that.
That was Jason Lee.
Ah.
And his name really isn't Jason Lee, it's Jason Brown.
But the point simply is there are, in 1990, the U.S. Census had a question on, are you a Vietnam veteran?
Yeah.
13 million people said yes. There are, in fact, 2.5 million Vietnam veterans. 11 million people were lying about it on a census form. You didn't get any extra money for being a Vietnam veteran when you filled out the census form. You didn't get any greater credit, but they lied about it. And you can go back and you can look at this time and time again. Somebody in the 70s and 80s, somebody would go nuts and shoot up a place. They say, well, he was a Vietnam veteran. You'd find out that the guy wasn't a Vietnam veteran. He wasn't in the Army, wasn't in the military. And it just goes on and on and on like that. And you know, the point simply is this, that I had not realized that people would actually go to an awful lot of trouble. They would buy the paraphernalia. They would alter, back in those days, it was easy to alter a DD Form 214 to put any information in that you wanted so you could present this document. There was a story that came out, and there was these 8 guys in a support group, Vietnam veterans, and they would just have these horrific tales of combat, and they were just totally screwed up. And so the psychologist, the psychiatrist, couldn't break through to them, but he had a friend who had a master's degree in psychology, and he was a Green Beret. He had the right documentation. He went to talk to these guys, and they didn't want anything to do with him because they didn't believe what he was saying. It turned out not one of those guys had served in Vietnam. Some of them hadn't even been in the Army, but here's a support group of these guys sitting around telling these horrific tales of combat, and they were all making it up.
Well, look at what was it, an NBC newscaster who lied about what he did in Vietnam or covering one of the wars?
Well, no, it was Brian Williams.
Brian Williams, that's it.
And I've actually thought about this, and I think I understand what happened. Is that he was in Iraq as a newsman. I was in Iraq as a soldier, so that's a whole different argument. And there was a flight of helicopters, and one of them was shot at or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think in his mind, he just truly began to believe that he was on the helicopter that was hit. I think he truly believed that, and it was just that he had been in close proximity of that. And in his mind, it just sort of morphed into it. And I think a lot of people suffer from the same sort of thing when we try to access memories, go back decades, or in this time just years, to access memories of our experiences, and sometimes they just morph into things that they are not.
You know, Kevin, when you and I first started talking, you were a captain, then you went to major, now you're lieutenant colonel. What's next for you? What's your next rank?
Well, if I was still in the military and not retired, it would be colonel.
Yeah.
But
a full bird, right?
Yes. 06 in the parlance. But I'm retired, so there's only one man in history that I know of who, once he was retired and not called back to service for whatever reason, was promoted after he had retired, and that's Lee Emery, from the guy that runs around being the gunnery sergeant, and he had retired as a sergeant first class, I think it was, and the commandant of the Marine Corps, because he'd done so much for the Marine Corps, promoted him honorarily to gunnery sergeant. But once you're retired or once you're out, then you don't get promoted any further along.
Yeah.
So I will remain probably forever as a lieutenant colonel. But at least I can prove that.
Oh my gosh! I knew we were going to get into this sooner or later. Yeah, of course, X-Zone Nation, you all remember kal-korff with the Israeli Secret Service, or Special Secret Service, or Special Secret something or other.
Yes, my pal kal-korff.
Oh my God! Talk about forgetting to take your meds.
Well, the interesting thing was, right after I'd gotten back from Iraq, I'd gotten a couple of emails from kal-korff, and he was just just so incredibly supportive of me and all the work I had done, and he wanted me to know he was a captain too in this special secret service that he had created in his own mind, and I think expected me to treat him as an equal, and I kind of blew him off, and that irritated the hell out of him. And so then he started going in these other directions. But
Yeah,
I mean, he was. I was going to be audited by, was it KMPG or KPMG?
Right.
And I'm thinking, here's an international financial organization. Why in the hell would they be auditing a UFO book written by some guy in the United States to see what is true and what is wrong? And Korff said, well, if you show me that I've been wrong on anything, I will quickly apologize for it. And so I sent him a long list of the mistakes he'd made in his book, getting the names of people wrong. He said there were no African American sergeants in Roswell in 1947 because the services were integrated or
segregated. Yeah,
did not understand that it meant that there were actually black people in the service. They just were in their own units. And I have a copy of the yearbook that Walter Haut had created in Roswell in July of 1947, and I counted 24 black NCOs in the unit. And so he said he'd never heard a word from him on that. But he said he'd talked to some historian at the Pentagon who told him that there were no African Americans in the military at the time. And I'm thinking, I cannot believe a historian wouldn't understand that there have been black people in the United States military since the Revolutionary War, basically. And often, and that's the other thing I don't understand. I mean, when we got into World War II, the African Americans signed up in great numbers to help defend the country, and then they come back to the same crap they left. And I'm thinking, what motivated them to, knowing how they've been treated? What would motivate them to want to defend the country? I think, these guys were great.
Pride.
Yeah, pride and honor.
Yeah.
These guys were great, and they served well, and they proved repeatedly that they were
they were
soldiers.
valuable. They were valuable, and they still are to this very day. Yeah.
And there's discussion that the Civil War would have gone on longer had it not been for the numbers of African American soldiers that served for the Union. But it just amazes me that these sorts of things go on. But Korff was saying, well, there were no black NCOs in Roswell, and actually the number 24 is too low because Walter Haut had told me that 10 to 15% of the people assigned to the base at the time were not in the yearbook.
Right.
So that means there were additional ones, but I could count 24. All he had to do was ask somebody with the yearbook, how many you got? And I counted them. There's 24.
Yeah, I remember when I checked with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, and they contacted the Israeli embassy in Ottawa to check all this out. And they got back to me well within a day, and they said, no, but who is this guy who's claiming he's a so-and-so? Oh, the name is kal-korff.
And so once I got promoted to major, because he'd sent me some emails, and I mentioned that I had been promoted to major. Well, suddenly he was promoted to colonel. He jumped from captain to colonel, just right over the top of me. And so, and he kept coming up with, he had this aide and this adjutant, and their writing style all seemed to mimic his. So.
Well, of course. I think that he suffered from a multiple personality disorder.
I thought it was borderline personality disorder, but
I really think that he had gone over the edge.
Yes.
And
I think there were things that he believed, he truly believed that he was involved in that aren't true. But I will remember we were going to have this great debate with kal-korff for over 4 hours on your show, and my wife said to me repeatedly, "What are you, Rob, going to talk about for 4 hours?" Because she knew he wasn't going to show up.
Yeah.
What are you guys going to talk about for 4 hours? Well, we'll think of something.
kal-korff not showing up.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
But there's another problem. He came across as semi-credible.
Yeah, he did.
He sounded like he knew what he was talking about. So he makes everybody look bad when it blows up. But it's the same thing with anybody who inflates their credentials, inflates their educational background. It makes us all look bad. And I see things written about me. There was one group that said I was too old to be a soldier. I couldn't possibly have been in Iraq. I must have made the whole thing up. And that was why I posted on my blog pictures of me in Iraq.
Oh, for goodness sake.
I've got one of me standing under a sign that says Baghdad International Airport, which I thought, it says it in English and it says in Arabic. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, that ought to pretty well demonstrate I'm here. I got pictures of me sitting on a throne in Saddam Hussein's big palace in downtown Baghdad. So I can prove it. And the other interesting thing is all these people can talk about connections to the CIA. Well, while we were in Iraq, the CIA compound and the FBI compound was co-located close to ours. Mm-hmm. And there had been intelligence developed that the bad guys were going to try to attack our end of the compound. So we met daily with the FBI and the CIA, and I was actually coordinating the patrols because they didn't have the weaponry and the numbers we had, so we were patrolling the whole area. And I said, make sure you don't shoot at my guys. So I worked with the CIA while I was in Iraq. I can actually prove that because there was a document I have. Yep. It was the OER written by the battalion commander. He says, worked with the FBI and the CIA, and I'm going, yeah. All these guys talking about their connections with the CIA, I can actually demonstrate it with a document.
Exactly.
But all we were doing was I would meet with them in the evening, and we'd talk about what we needed for perimeter mm-hmm. defense, and nothing ever happened. But we were prepared for it, and that was my whole involvement with the CIA and the FBI while I was in Iraq.
Hey, Kev, you and I have to take a commercial break. It's always great talking to you, my friend. In my book, you are the voice of credibility when it comes to UFOs. And
Thank you.
I've said this on air, and I've said this off air. And I believe that with all my heart, buddy. Exonation, Kevin Randle, Lieutenant Colonel, retired. Kevin Randle is our guest this hour. His blogspot, kevinrandle.blogspot.com. And Kevin and I will be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news as we continue from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Exonation, don't forget, Wednesday, September 30th, 8 p.m. until 10 p.m. Stanton T. Friedman debates Michael Horn right here on the X Zone about the Billy Meyer case. I'm not kidding. Who knows? Maybe one won't show. Maybe a kal-korff will call in. This is the X Zone, a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. And I'll be back with Kevin Randle as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. Ever wondered if your advertising dollar is really working for you? If your ad would have been here, you and more than 4 million people would be listening to it right now. Contact ads at xzoneradiotv.com.
The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com.
Manifestation is driven by imagination, intent, and passion. In our culture, all three have been distorted and disabled by modern media and exploitation. Re-engage your imagination and your passion by entering into the world of paranormal romance. Kahira O'Donnell takes her readers on an exciting journey into the endless possibilities of loving, passionate, and mutually respectful male-female relationship. Her latest book, The Long Dark Night, features special ops adventure, a daring rescue, a psychic woman from the stars, and a special agent that will die to protect her. The Long Dark Night by Kahira O'Donnell is now available at KahiraO'Donnell.com or Amazon.com. Jeff Gilson didn't go out looking for adventure, danger, or the answers to most of the controversial political intrigues of the past 30 years. But he found all three when he began investigating the mysterious death of his close friend, Margaret Thatcher's favorite speechwriter. Just an ordinary guy living in a small, sleepy suburb 20 miles outside of London, Jeff's questions provoked a powerful response on both sides of the Atlantic. He was shot at, warned off by the CIA, and formed a close bond with one of Israel's most notorious intelligence officers. Relive Jeff's gripping adventure in his fast-paced book, Maggie's Hammer. Peel away the layers of establishment deception and discover, as Jeff did, that his friend was an assassin with British intelligence, that Great Britain has been America's secret hitman for the past 30 years, and that Princess Diana was not the target in that Parisian tunnel. All of this and more when you visit www.maggieshammer.com and find the link to buying this explosive book online. More and more ordinary people feel they no longer have control of their lives. Jeff fought back. He asked the difficult questions. He set out to redesign his own destiny, and you can do the same using Maggie's Hammer as your guide. Don't waste a moment. Buy it today. Visit www.maggieshammer.com.
Little children aren't the only ones afraid of the dark. Millions of soldiers return from war zones with PTSD, anger, frustration, fear, and loneliness, much of which surfaces during the darkness of the night. You have the chance to change the lives of these American heroes. Songs and Stories for Soldiers.us provides free MP3 players for these men and women. With a list of 3 million songs in 16 different styles, 100,000 audiobooks, and 30,000 old-time radio programs, every veteran can find something to soothe and comfort them at no cost. All our players contain an 8-hour audio program designed to help veterans fall asleep. With 1,500 plus vets now participating, it's our goal to deliver 10,000 audio players this year. Go to our website at songsandstoriesforsoldiers.us. Help us help a veteran make it through the night.
Wouldn't you love to know the secret to everything? Well then, meet Dr. Kimberly McGeorge and her cutting-edge breakthrough knowledge that combines science with possibility. Dr. Kimberly brings real-life answers and healing to those open to alternative solutions. She teaches solution-based programs and classes that will change all areas of your life forever. Specializing in conscious creation, intuitive readings, and energy medicine, you can rapidly shift health, relationships, business, and money and abundance challenges quickly. Receive her best-selling book, Secret to Everything, at no cost by going to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone. That's right, transformation can start now. Just go to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone and receive Dr. Kimberly's book for free.
And welcome back, everyone. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell. My very special guest this hour is Lieutenant Colonel, I like saying that, Kevin Randle, retired. And first of all, Kevin, it's always great having to you. And, thank you to all who have gone in the past, who are on station right now, and who are going to, in the future, protect us, maintain our democracy and our freedom. Thank you from everyone, Kevin.
Well, you're welcome, but you can't address me as Colonel. It is proper.
Oh, okay. So you want me to drop the friendship of Kevin and call you
No,
Colonel?
No. You kept saying Lieutenant Colonel. It would be, as a Lieutenant Colonel, it's perfectly acceptable to address a Lieutenant Colonel as Colonel.
All right, Colonel.
But you can call me Kevin because
You can call me Ray. You can call me Jay. Remember that?
Yes, I do, unfortunately.
Kevin, it's always great talking to you, my friend. I had we were at the Alien Cosmic Expo a couple of months ago in Brantford, Ontario. And Stanton T. Friedman was there. And so was Paul Hellyer, the former defense minister of Canada and the deputy prime minister of Canada. And I sent you a link to an interview that I did, the transcript of the interview with Paul Hellyer. And what is your take on Paul Hellyer and his claims that, basically he wasn't into the UFOs until after he got out of politics and read a book on UFOs, and this is where his UFO experience comes from?
Well, I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head there, which is while he was in the important positions that he held, he was not exposed to UFO material.
Exactly.
And then once he's out of it, this is his new thing that he's glommed onto is UFOs. And I've seen that quite a bit from people where they had no experience with UFOs while in those positions of importance.
Mm-hmm.
And that since they held those positions of importance, they're assumed to be credible people simply for that reason.
Well, I have got to tell you what I did today. And I figured you would be the perfect person to discuss it with and share it with the X-Zone Nation. I sent a letter to every presidential candidate, including Secretary Clinton, asking them, number one, if they'd like to come on the show to discuss their point of view of UFOs and extraterrestrials. Now, I don't think I will hear from anyone, except maybe Trump or Jeb Bush, because he needs all the help he can get. Can you see an extraterrestrial meeting with Trump?
No, but then again, I can't see a lot of people meeting with Trump. I do not understand this. And unfortunately, I'm in Iowa, and we have the First of the Nation caucuses, so it's the first I guess, challenge to their candidacy.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, we are already inundated with the political ads.
Wow.
And during the midterms,
mm-hmm.
we had 17,000 political ads aimed at us because one of our Senate seats was up for grabs. So I'm thinking it's going to be a long time before we see any more of this. In May, they started again in May with the political ads, starting, I think it was Perry from Texas, started running political ads. So, we just inundated with this stuff. But I can't see... UFOs is sort of a third rail in politics. You just don't want to touch it because you'll be identified as that UFO guy. Even though you might say something very intelligent about UFOs or alien visitation or whatever, the news media is going to go after you merely for mentioning UFOs.
Mm-hmm.
So I suspect you won't hear anything.
I know, but I thought it was worth a shot. At least I could say I tried to get them on the show. I extended the invitation.
And you've got an international audience.
That's right.
You would think, well, if I'm down at the bottom in the 2% range, I'm thinking, well, maybe I should go on any program that will give me publicity here.
Yeah.
In fact, I think I'll announce my candidacy for 2020.
Hey, can I be your media guy?
Immediately.
Yeah, can I be your media guy? I'll work hard for you. I won't even charge you.
Sounds good to me.
All right, there we go. Randall for president. 2020. What is it? 2020? Yeah, 2020, yeah. Right? Yeah. The Iran deal was basically given the green light. The Iran nuclear deal. As a former member of the military and as an American, what's your take on that deal?
I'm not particularly happy about it, but it's just typical of the United States in the last 20 or 30 years, where we make deals based not on what is best for the nation, but what is best for the legacy of the person who happens to be in power. I'm astonished that Kerry is the Secretary of State, the way he acted after his return from Vietnam, and the things that he did and the things that he said at that time. And yet here's our Secretary of State running around making deals with Iran. And what they don't seem to understand is, while we might think of ourselves as Americans as honorable people and we live up to any agreement we make, and I realize history doesn't bear that out, but we know that they're going to do what is their best interest, no matter what agreements they've made. And we've seen that time and again in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. We saw it with Adolf Hitler in Europe. I mean, the guy says, we won't do this, we won't do that, and then it became expedient for him to do it, and he changed his mind. He didn't live up to his agreements, which is not to say any of these people are like Hitler. It's just merely looking at a historical context of people who say, well, we'll make this agreement, and tomorrow, if we don't like it, we'll just tear it up.
Well, speaking about, agreements, this is the 70th anniversary this year of the end of World War II. And in China, they had their military parade, and they were basically flexing their muscles at the United States. And even Russian President Putin was there at the Chinese military parade day. With China flexing her muscle, with China now making her own aircraft carriers, with China now building these islands 600 miles offshore of mainland China, what is this all part of? Is this basically China on one side, Russia on the other, and they're going to squeeze the middle, being North America?
I have no idea what their plan is, but the one thing that I did notice is when I was in Germany a number of years ago, right after the wall had come down, and I was taken to this big plaza that had been erected for communism, to celebrate communism. The one thing that struck me was how drab and dreary it was, grays and browns and blacks. And I looked across this plaza that was the monument to communism, and there was a McDonald's. And I thought, well, we've won that one.
And even North Korea is starting to flex its muscle. And you've got to ask yourself, what in the name of God is going on? We've just given, or the United States has just given what? $100 billion to Iran?
I don't get it. It seems so clear to me. But then again, I suppose I could say, well, we're not privy to a lot of what has gone on in the background and what is classified to understand what would motivate these things. But I think too often in the United States now, we seem to think we have to take a back seat to prove that we're not the bullies of the world. We have to be careful on what we do and what we say so we don't offend people. And sometimes you just have to offend them, and move forward with what is in the best interest for the United States, what is in the best interest for North America, Canada, and Mexico, what is in the best interest of the Western Hemisphere.
That's right. And
move it on from there, as opposed to what is the best interest for the Iranians.
I was watching CNN today, and they had this report on China's military parade day, and Russia was there, and I'm sitting there waiting, saying to myself, all right, they're going to make the connection. They're going to make the connection. They didn't make the connection. Well, wait a minute. We were just told a couple of weeks ago that Russia and China were the main people who were hacking U.S. computers, getting the names and all the information on employees, operatives, and so on. And now Putin is in China at their military day parade. Well, am I seeing something that's not there?
It's hard to look at the complex history there, because at one point we thought that China and Russia were working together to spread communists throughout the world, and it turned out there was a big rift between the communists, between the Chinese communists and the Russian communists. They viewed communism in a different way. Now Russia is basically capitalistic, and China's moving in that direction. And you remember George Patton said once World War II was over, what we should have done is rearm the Nazis and send them to Moscow again, because he thought we would have to fight the Soviets at some point. And fortunately, that never happened. So you wonder if the freedom of information that's spreading around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the point behind I think, Radio Free Europe and the Voice of America, was to let the people behind the Iron Curtains know what was going on in the rest of the world. And if you read the biography of Belenko, who defected in 1975, 1976 in a MiG-25, landed it in Japan. And he, in the debriefing, they're talking about how they would show the worst sections of New York in documentaries and say, this is how they're living in America. And he's saying, yes, but who owned all the cars on the streets? You know, they could see all the cars. Who owned all those cars driving through these bad parts of some of the cities? And so the information is getting out there, and I think people realize, when people see how freedom works in Canada, works in the United States, works in Europe, they're going to want that same sort of freedom. So, it kind of works for us. And now we see in China there are developing an entrepreneurial class. And so it kind of changes the complexity of communism inside their country by seeing how the rest of the world lives, and they want to be able to do that.
Yeah.
You know, I had to go to Denver over the weekend, and I didn't have to check with anybody other than my wife, of course.
Of course.
Didn't have to check with anybody to cross the border from Iowa into Nebraska into Colorado. Actually, I went to Cheyenne, Wyoming first, and then down to Denver. But I mean, I could just jump in my car and do that. And in some countries, you'd go through checkpoint and checkpoint and checkpoint, and you'd have to justify that trip. And I think people see that, and they see how relatively well we all live in Canada, the United States, and they want to have a part of that for themselves. And I think what that does is help us educate the rest of the world into what they can have, and I think that works for us, as opposed to looking at the military demonstrations of power, because I think you're gonna see the same thing happening in China and other places, except for North Korea, where they're seeing what this freedom we have really is.
Well, even North Korea is getting into the swing of things, because they had on one of the news channels, they had a musical number that was choreographed apparently by the supreme leader, and he's got all these girls on stage with mini skirts on, and they're doing the choreography that you'd see on any American or American or Canadian television show. And in the background, they've got a giant screen with an intercontinental ballistic missile going up, and they have a picture of the globe next with the map of the United States, and the missile blows up the United States, and everybody stands up and applauds.
And of course, that's fantasy.
Yeah.
But I think when you look at, I think the internet is responsible. I love the internet. I mean, it's great, the things you can look up on the internet if you just have some sort of filter. Meaning, personally, you read something saying, well, that's crapola.
Yeah.
Not opposed to me saying, that's crapola, you shouldn't read it. But I think with the circulation of information throughout the world, that's going to change attitudes with a lot of people. And they're going to see how well some of the world lives as opposed to how they live, and they're going to want to move in the direction of that. You know, I mean, here in the United States, in Canada, we have it really good.
But we take it for granted.
Yes. And that's the one thing I noticed when I got back from Vietnam. One of the things that we really enjoyed was A, the all-night generator, and B, the big projects, and flush toilets. Oh my God, a toilet that flushes! This is great.
Exactly.
So we do get some sense. I mean, some of us sometimes get some sense of how lucky we are.
One more question. I just want to go back to UFOs and strange, weird, and bizarre.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah. It's getting a little too serious here, wasn't it? Planet Serpo. What is your take on that story?
Does anybody really believe that?
Well, yeah.
I mean, it's
Paul
as bad
Hillier.
as the guy who was 17 and abducted to serve 20 years in the military, the alien military, and then 15 minutes after he was abducted, he was put back. After he served his 20 years, he was put back into his bed. So his parents never saw that he was gone. There's no evidence for that. It's just tales being told, and you would think that the people who have traveled, that you would get some handle on it in some fashion, and you just can't get a handle on any of it. It's all tales being told.
But you know what scares me about this whole thing? When you've got people like Paul Hillier, who was the former defense minister and the former deputy prime minister for Canada, saying that he knows for a fact it's true. That scares the hell out of me.
But he wasn't saying it as being true when he was a high official in the Canadian government. You know, this is something that developed later. And there's a fellow named Robert French, and I hesitate to bring it up because he is a retired military officer. He was a lieutenant colonel. He did serve in Vietnam at least one time, as he claimed, and things like that. But it is clear that he has moved himself from a fairly good military career into the realm of fantasy. And he's talking about Project Blue Book, and he says, I helped write the Blue Book. There is no Blue Book. It was the project's name. How, if you worked on it, how would you not know that? But when he was with the Air Force, and I think he was a squadron commander at one point. He flew combat missions in Vietnam. When he was doing that, these other things didn't worry him. And I think what we run into is kind of an old guy syndrome. He's now reaching out for the attention that he used to have, and I think that might be Hilliard. He's no longer a high official in the Canadian government,
That's right.
And this is the way he gets the attention that he used to have.
And I can see that with a lot of the people within the UFO community. You know, Stan Friedman is still out there. God bless him. What is he, 80?
He's old. I think he's like 83 or 84.
You know,
he's like ancient.
But he's a hell of a nice guy. You know,
and he's a hell of a showman.
Yeah,
he puts on a good show.
Oh, definitely.
The only complaint I have about Stan Friedman is he embraces everything. He now believes Aztec took place. I'm thinking, Stan, have you looked at the evidence, for crying out loud? And I said to him in Roswell a couple of years ago, I said, really, Aztec? And he said, yes. And I looked at the book on Aztec that just came out by Scott Ramsey. I looked at that stuff, and I said, there's nothing here. It's secondhand testimony. It's misrepresented testimony. It's just not there. But Stan embraces it. And if I have a complaint about Stan, that's it. He just embraces everything. But he puts on a good show. He entertains people, and he's very persuasive when he talks.
You know, plus, what would Roswell, New Mexico be without Stanton Friedman?
I think actually the key to the Roswell wasn't Stan, it was Walter Haut. I think that's the real key to it.
But wasn't Stan the one who basically publicized the entire thing through his books?
No. His books came out later. The first book was by William Moore and Charles Berlitz, The Roswell Incident.
Then how come it didn't take off till Friedman got involved?
It didn't take off until Don Schmidt and I got involved, and Stan Friedman then came back into it.
So there's the truth behind it.
That's my truth, which I'm sure Stan would argue at a point. But it in 1980, the Roswell incident hardly made a blip. I remember seeing the book when it first came out and thinking to myself, oh, my God, it's the Aztec story repackaged in Roswell. And it wasn't until 89 that the Center for UFO Studies decided to reinvestigate Roswell. And they talked to Stan, they talked to some of the people, realized there were other witnesses, and they were going to do an investigation. And Don Schmidt asked me if I wanted to participate because he thought my military background would help me or help them with witnesses with a military background.
Sure.
A lot of people were military witnesses, and I would understand things that civilians might not understand. And so we got into the Roswell aspect of it, and Stan was chasing MJ-12 at the time, and then he moved over to Roswell, and He came to Don and me at one point and proposed that his name would go third on our book, and he would only take a quarter of the money. We had set everything up. We had gotten everything going. I was working through my agent and my publishers to get all this stuff going, and that was Stan's proposal. And I think when we didn't say, yeah, Stan, come on board, he got annoyed with us. But then he began his look at the Roswell case as well.
Kevin, as always, when I'm with you, my good friend, time goes by so fast. I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. Always a great pleasure talking to you.
Can we mention one thing?
We can
mention. My new book, UFO Dossier, will be coming out this month.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we bring you back on the show when your book is out, and we'll dedicate an entire show to it.
I love that idea.
You've got it, my friend. Kevin, take care of yourself. And once again, thank you for all you've done.
Thank you.
Take care, buddy.
Bye.
Bye-bye now. Exo Nation, Kevin Randle has been my guest this hour. www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news, as we are going to be doing X-1. I've got 2 episodes lined up for tonight. The first one is the Martian invasion, and the second one is First Contact. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and we're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free, 1-800-610-7035. Email xzone at xzoneradiotv.com. The X-Zone is a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And we come to you Monday through Friday from 8 p.m. until midnight Eastern on the X-Zone Broadcast Network and the Starcom Radio Network. I'll be back on the other side of this break as we continue from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away now.